Good evening. This is Dwayne Lowry for the DPP Grain Desk with the Sunday Night Grain Outlook for Sunday, September 11th. There's not much to really expect here this evening, and not much to really key on. It's going to be a pre-report session with USDA offered the latest carryout and production numbers tomorrow morning. The trade certainly goes into this report tomorrow expecting bullish data. The question is the question is whether or not it's going to be as bullish as what the market has been trading and as market has been digesting and pricing in. Recent price action has sold off the highs, leading us to believe that it's reasonable that the market has already factored in some of these small yields. On the other hand, the trade could look at the small yields tomorrow and say that the carryout is just too small and there's got to be some sort of a price recovery. I guess it depends on whether you go into this with a bullish bias already or whether you go into it with a cautious and concerned about seasonal pressures and outside markets, poor economy, and the threat of additional liquidation pressures. The weather forecast is pretty much the same as it was on Friday. If you're counting raindrops, the 6 to 15-day window might look a little wetter for the U.S. plains wheat. Might be a little bit bearish there. The wheat market's already very oversold. And if there were not a report out tomorrow, I think you'd find the technical people looking to buy wheat on any weakness tonight. I'm not sure that'll be the case with a report out of respect for the report. As far as the corn's concerned, the market liquidated quite a bit in the last few days, and it's sold off, and so the technical conditions might be a little bit oversold. It could also be argued that it's vulnerable to additional liquidation pressures if there's any disappointment from USDA tomorrow. Disappointment in the form of not as bullish data, or the reaction to bullish data, fails to live up to expectations and hope. There's a lot of longs in the market that were added over the last few weeks that are not so profitable here tonight, and the pressure's on to get a bullish report and/or a bullish reaction post-report. What happens if we get either a bearish surprise, USDA is not as aggressive, further lowering yield estimates, or if we get a yield estimate in line with expectations, we get a knee-jerk reaction higher tomorrow morning and the market begins to falter. Under that type of scenario, you can expect liquidation pressures to quickly escalate. Harvest and the seasonal pressures are just ahead. It's interesting to note that some of the early yield reports have offered better than expected yields, even in areas that expected to be hurt by a fair amount. And so there's been some caution in the last few days by longs that maybe the early yield reports suggest that yield expectations have been ratcheted too low in a race to beat the next guy with the lower projection type of mentality that's existed here for the last 2 or 3 weeks. As far as soybeans are concerned, not much here for news. People expect acreage to be lowered. They expect bean yields to be lowered by about 1/2 bushel an acre from last month's report. There's not and has not been as strong of a bias from traders to be embracing yield declines in corn or in beans as much as they have been in corn. Even for tomorrow's report, the trade's expecting at least a 4 bushel an acre decline from last month. So the market is really leaning into these reports tomorrow with the bearish bias, and the USDA's got quite a job ahead of it if it's going to live up to these expectations and not offer disappointment. So as far as expectations for tonight, I think we're looking at steady, better corn and bean values just in preparation for a report, with the trade expecting bullish numbers and with the trade feeling that maybe we liquidated enough last week. Wheats might be called a little bit easier to begin with based on weather, but technical conditions are oversold there. I don't think anybody's going to want to press the short side of wheat. There's a few things of points of interest that need to be mentioned. The U.S. dollar index has performed well in the last several days. In fact, Friday's close took it to the highest level seen in the U.S. dollar since February. Now keep in mind, that's on a backdrop of everybody being bearish the dollar and bullish gold and talking about inflation and a very weak dollar outlook. And so this is quite a contrary move to what was expected. Typically that's not supportive to commodities in general, and it'll be interesting to see how that follows through here this week and over the next several days. But that's something of interest. I think it's also interesting to point out that the top in early May, we've been in a decline since that time, and I'm talking about crude oil here, and it looks like we might be in a position to pretty soon resume that downtrend. That also is a weight on commodities. If you remember back to when we had the biggest runs to the upside in all these commodities, at the backbone key to that was the crude oil market. That trend peaked in May. It's been declining since then, and we've recently had a short-term corrective bounce, and that appears to soon be over, and so that's worth watching. The gold market for the last month has been showing some violent topping action, but could be topping action anyway, and that needs to be watched. The wheat fundamentals are not bullish, are not expected to change much in tomorrow's report. The wheat market is priced in a manner to displace corn usage, and has been so for the last few months, so that could be a drag on the corn market. So there's other things to look at other than just tomorrow's report, and as far as the report is concerned, it is more important to see the reaction to the numbers than the numbers themselves. It is also important to watch early harvest yield results over the next week or 10 days, and pay attention to the idea that corn yield reports offer any signs that pessimism towards yields could have been exaggerated. For the DPP Grain Desk, this has been Dwayne Lowry. Thank you.